All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Retail. My name is Matt Pfeiffer. We are so excited to have Mike Graen here with us today to continue his series on-shelf availability. Mike is hosting Steve Statler, the CMO and ESG Lead of Wiliot. And just a couple of housekeeping issues before we get started. First of all, this and each of our conversations in the on-shelf availability series is presented by the University of Arkansas, with the #1 undergraduate supply chain program in the country for the second year in a row. Super thankful to University of Arkansas for their support of this program. Also, our friends at Westrock Coffee. With offices in 10 countries, the company sources coffee and tea from 35 origin countries. And for more information, visit westrockcoffee.com. Also got a couple of great sponsors from industry and Braincorp and Barcoding. We appreciate them so much for their contribution to the conversations as well as to the platform. In case you missed it, Mike actually helped us to kick off this whole small group initiative back in May of last year and has put up just a tremendous body of work from that very first conversation. You can see some of those titles there. And if you missed out on any of these or want to watch them again, you could go to our YouTube channel and go to @ConversationsOnRetail. We're also excited to partner with Mike in the development of a brand new resource called On-Shelf Availability. It's at onshelfavailability.com. It's a gathering place and a resource center for industry professionals where you can find experts, solutions, and thought leadership. Love for you to check that website out. Give us some feedback, and then I know Mike would be delighted to have you involved as well. Lastly, just a reminder that this is a conversation, not a presentation, and we would love for you all to actively participate, and you can do that by clicking on the Q&A button and submitting your questions, your comments, your insights, even pushing back on some things if it's not been consistent with your own experience in writing. So again, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom page and enter those questions. Mike likes for us to make sure that we talk about being in full compliance with federal antitrust laws. So we're going to refrain from asking any questions related to pricing, margins, discounts, timing of price changes, marketing, or anything that would be sort of off limits in that respect. We're so glad you're here, and let's get started.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today. I am really excited to have this conversation with Steve. Steve and I have talked a couple of different times before, and I'm really excited. And frankly, I'm going to be a student today, Steve. I'm going to learn some stuff because I think we just had a kind of off-camera conversation that said sometimes it's not what you don't know that's hurt you; it's what you know that's not so. And I think there's some perceptions around Bluetooth technology that people may not really understand how it works, what it works for, et cetera. So we're going to introduce Steve here in just a minute, but what I want to do is kind of set the context for the audience. Matt, you're exactly right. This is a conversation on retail. We're going to learn some things. We would ask you to go ahead, and if you have any questions or any builds you'd like to make, go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'd be happy to take those. But as you know, this is a session which is focused on shelf availability, things that are on the shelf available for customers to buy, or things that are on the shelf for a associate in a store to pick up for a customer to buy. It's all about that. And when we talk about that, just as a brief context to set some perspective here, I've got some examples here of here's a shelf that looks like it's in pretty good shape. We definitely see that we have one out of stock product right there, but everything else by the normal eye would say it looks in pretty good shape. And Steve and I know, because we've been in this business for a while, there's probably some issues here. We've got some situation where we have some labels missing. We've got some issues where these blue boxes where the prices on the shelf and the price at the register are different. We have some opportunities to take product off of a kind of a down stock or top shelf thing and put it where it's supposed to go on the shelf when it will fit. And then we have items that are plugged, or otherwise the label's there, the product's there, but the product and the label are different. So it's the incorrect product is there. Well, okay, great. That's all interesting. We've talked about that before, but we've talked about like 6 different ways to measure OSA. One is algorithms, and we've had a series of sessions on algorithms. We've talked about store audits. This happens to be field agent, the ability. We've talked to the field agent and the Trax folks before about that capability. We've talked about shelf scanning robots. This is an example of a Badger robot at Woodman's scanning the shelf for out of stock. We've talked a lot about RFID and radio frequency identification and how that's used, particularly in general merchandise and apparel, and starting to get in some food categories. We've talked about some of the these online shopping services like Instacart, where you order something and it's not available. They can indicate that to you on the application. And we've talked about fixed readers. So now we're talking to Wiliot, who is a completely different platform on this. But one of the things I want to make sure we understand, if things are not on the shelf, Steve, there's usually a couple of reasons why. I know these way oversimplified. But store operations, meaning the product could be sitting in the back room, but not on the sales floor. And last time I checked, we don't sell a lot of stuff in the back room. Could be supply chain, could be stuck at the DC, could be the manufacturer didn't order, could be lots of different reasons, or it could be store on hand accuracy. And I think one of the beautiful things that we're going to be talking about here in a minute is the supply chain goes from raw materials through manufacturing, through distribution, to the distribution center, to the retailer, to the store. And this happens to be a Walmart example, but backroom and sales floor of a Walmart store to the customer. The critical part for me is if product is going to move this way, then what has to move the opposite direction is information. Right? Information about where this particular product is. So with that, I want to introduce Steve. Steve and I have been working together. He's the CMO at Wiliot Technology. And Steve, before we jump into the technology stuff, one of the things I always love to ask our guests, because we're not only supply chain technology professionals in the retail space, but we're also customers, and we shop like every other customer. We order things online and go to pick them up like every other customer. Could you tell us from a personal perspective, from a shopping standpoint, any time where you actually were disappointed, where you ordered something or went in to get something from a store and it wasn't there? I'd love to hear your story.
Well, first, Mike, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be on your show. I think it's doing good work. And I love this question because it makes what you're doing, what we're doing, personal. And I have actually two that I wanted to talk about briefly, but they both had COVID as the catalyst. And one was, during that time, there was a high level of anxiety. And like it or not, a lot of us had to get tested. But finding the kits was really hard. That was something that really stressed our supply chains. And I remember going online and being very pleased with myself, showing my wife I'd found that one pharmacy where I could get the kit. So I got in the car, drove 25 minutes, got to the store, went to the shelf, nothing. And I'm like, oh, have you just run out? It's like, no, we haven't had any of these for ages. But so that was one that made me look really stupid. And I was also very anxious. But the other thing that is even more personal is actually my mother. During COVID, she's in her 80s. Mobility's not her strong point. And so COVID taught her, along with millions of other people, to buy online and have the home deliveries. But she struggles with the technology, and it's a source of she's 80. The internet didn't exist actually the internet didn't exist when I was a kid, but it certainly didn't exist when she was. So she struggles. And when she orders something and it doesn't arrive, she just gets really confused. And, for her, this is a lifeline. I do her shopping when that doesn't work, but it's a source of exasperation and frustration for her. And, you're only as happy as your least happy member of your family, your kids and your parents. And so it really upsets me.
Yeah, and it does. And that's a much more personal. When you start talking about your health, or you start talking about food that you put in your body, or medicines you put in your body, I can go to the store and be disappointed because they don't have my printer cartridge. That's one of my favorite examples. They may have 1,000 printer cartridges, but the black one for my printer is not available. I get aggravated, but I can quickly get out my phone and order it from Amazon or Best Buy or somebody and have it show it a couple of days later. When you start talking about COVID tests, in the heat of the pandemic, you can't find those. You start getting panicky. Those are a couple of really, really good examples. Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people are very, very new. They've probably heard of Wiliot before. They've probably seen it on billboards. You being the marketing person, you've probably seen one of your videos with the back wall that you've done, et cetera. But walk us through it practically. Wiliot technology. Tell us about Wiliot and how did it come to be about?
Well, high level, very high level. I'll talk in abstract terms, then we'll get to the specifics. We're opening up a portal between the digital world of AI and ChatGPT and the entire physical world. If you think about the power of the internet, it's been bottled up until now. Really, only a few expensive things are connected. And then RFID did amazing pioneering work with snapshots of where things are. But what we're seeing now is the floodgates are opening, and it's now a real-time connection between every single thing and immense power that can really help to, I think, make a difference in some really important areas. Getting our supply chains more efficient means lower prices. It means less waste. It's better for the environment. We can solve things like productivity, which our developed world productivity is flatlined. We need it to improve if people like you and me get to retire. Crime and theft and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunities to bring the physical and the digital world together. We'll get into specifics. So that's kind of the vision that the founders had for Wiliot back in 2017, January of 2017. They'd sold their previous company to Qualcomm for hundreds of millions of dollars. That company pioneered a technology called millimeter wave, which, to grossly simplify, is one of the things that makes 5G a lot faster than 4G. So very successful exit and very innovative technology that's speeds up wireless in a premium fashion. What they decided, having spent a couple of years handing over the reins in Qualcomm, was that the Internet of Things, this applying the power of the internet to the physical world, had got into a dead end, a cul-de-sac. And really, we had done what human beings often do, which is over-engineered the solutions. And either the sensors were super expensive, or the readers were super expensive. And the result was we had the Internet of expensive things in some cases, or just a kind of very coarse-grained snapshot of the way things were, not the way things are. And the reason was that, readers cost thousands of dollars. And so you ended up having a lot of handheld reading of this RFID technology. The evolution of radio frequency identifier tags, these stickers with antennas that people see hanging on apparel labels, the cost of those had gone down, and that was very successful. But when the readers are expensive, you end up having the kind of situation, it's a bit like photography, when you used to have these black and white photographs that were generational photographs because the cameras were big and complicated and expensive. And you often wondered, well, what was their life really like? But you didn't know because they only had a few photographs every year. Now we have like 4K streaming video of every moment of our lives, and maybe we know more than we would really like. But that is the era that we feel like we're entering in, as you get both very low cost tags. This is one of the ones that we enable, and an ambient IoT, ambient meaning it's everywhere, it's all around, it's pervasive, where every radio can start to read those things. So it's not just the handheld readers, it's the Wi-Fi access points, it's the radios that are in your appliances, your fridge, your washing machine, your smart speaker, your phone, and that world where everything can have an identifier and everything can read it is going to give us a level of visibility, which means that you'll never have to worry about losing your glasses, your passport, your food will be safe. You won't have to worry about theft, counterfeit, all of these hidden overheads. And also, it'll be a way of working on-shelf availability so that when you go to the store, the thing that you are hoping to get, you can get. And you'll get it without a huge amount of overhead, without huge stock buffers or masses of extra people having to be hired that increase prices. So OSA, but in a world where things are done efficiently, which is at the end of the day what we need if we're going to have prices for everyday people that allow them to live better lives. Oh, I've lost your audio for some reason.
Sorry. I had an ambulance go by, so I thought I'd go on mute rather than you guys listen to the ambulance that went by. So what we've got is a situation where traditional, what we would call RAIN or UFH RFID, put a tag on the product, and let's just say it's a passive tag. The tag is fairly inexpensive, like somewhere between, I'm just going to give a broad range of a 5 to 10 cents kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But the readers to capture that, to say, here's where I am, to energize and get that feedback is fairly expensive, especially if you move to lots of them and a fixed infrastructure, et cetera. Yes. What you guys have done is, I would assume the cost of the tag is a little bit more with Wiliot, but there's really no reader required, because I'm imagining my cell phone, if I have a Bluetooth enabled cell phone, I'm probably energizing that tag and telling you the location of where that is. Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's a really good summary. The tags are today, we're a bit more expensive, but the price reduction, Moore's Law, Geoffrey Moore, one of the people that helped found Intel, predicted that the price of chip technology would halve every 18 months. And that's what we're seeing with what we're doing. So next year, our tags will be less than 10 cents. 18 months after that, you can expect the price to go down. And the reason is we're essentially using the same manufacturing process. We're actually working with the same companies to make what we sell, and we call them pixels, Wiliot IoT Pixels. This is one of them. It looks just like a conventional RFID tag. It's got an antenna on the back. It's got a chip that talks to it. One of the differences, it's got a Bluetooth qualification logo and an FCC certification logo. So you've probably never seen a sticker, unless you've seen one of these, that has that. And those basically mean that the FCC logo means this is pushing data out all of the time. It's capturing energy. It's actually an active radio that is starting the conversation rather than waiting to be talked to. And the Bluetooth logo just means that it can talk to smart speakers, phones, and Wi-Fi access points and doorbells and a bunch of other things that are starting to get radios in them. So these things are made using exactly the same machines that are used to make a RAIN RFID tag. And one of our investors happens to be Avery Dennison, one of the leaders in that space. And we work with them and their competitors, companies like Identiv and a bunch of other well-known names, to make the tags. And in fact, our goal is to not make any money from the tags. We sell software as a service, the insights, the triggers that say, oh, you're out of stock, or, oh, there's a temperature excursion. All of these, unlike regular RFID tags, they're temperature sensors. Later on this year, we'll have humidity sensing. And so it looks the same, but I would characterize it as an evolution. We stand on the shoulders of the original RFID pioneers. We use a lot of the same things, and in fact, we work with a lot of the same people. The difference is we're using commodity radios rather than these very specialist radios, which were developed with read rates in mind. If you think about, when this technology was first introduced, everyone was really concerned about, can I read 1,000 tags quickly, and can I read them very accurately? And so, what we did as engineers is we created these big, expensive readers that could say yes. But I was actually at a project review at one of our largest customer, and they said, I don't care about read rates. I care about visibility. I want 100% visibility. And if I get that with not 99% read rates, but a 90% read rate, because I'm using a reader that costs $25 rather than $2,000, I'm happy, because that gives me really high visibility, and it gives it to me without my store associate having to do anything, which is really the key. Because when the store associate's doing the reading, the process is working properly. The time you want the visibility is when things aren't working properly, when the thing got lost and it hasn't been scanned and it's just kind of sitting there frustrating some shopper who wants it and thinks that it's in the store. It's just not in the right place.
Gotcha. So walk us through kind of some practical examples in retail. Is this primarily supply chain? I'm putting these potential tags on cases to flow through the supply chain. I know that we had some interesting thing with produce crates of tracking those. Give us some practical examples in retail how this technology could be used.
So it can be used for so many things, but we believe the sweet spot is in grocery and case level tracking that can be done automatically and have sensing. And the key driver because retailers are busy and it's okay, amazing technology. It's a computer the size of a postage stamp. It's an ARM processor. They really don't care. They're trying to solve practical problems. And the biggest problem that's driving people to move to what we call ambient IoT is the on-shelf availability problem. And it's the number of nil picks, the time when an associate goes to pick something from a shelf to satisfy a customer, or a customer is doing that, is in double-digit percentage figures. And that's not sustainable when you're competing with the likes of Amazon that had a fresh start. Their entire supply chain was designed with this online use case in mind. And the brick and mortar retailers, they have amazing assets, stores that are close to people, human beings that you can talk to, a shopping experience that allows you to touch. But that's super expensive. So how do they compete with the online fresh start retailer? And they can start to bring up more automated warehouses like the folks at Amazon have. But the challenge with that is you have all of the brick and mortar overhead, and if you're doing everything that Amazon has done, then you've got all of that automation overhead. Or they can increase the buffer, start over ordering, but that's terrible for the balance sheet and costs go up. Or they can hire more people, and whilst that's great, it's really hard to hire the people, and that translates to more costs as well. So the technologies that you've been covering on this show are really the route that are going. And this solution, because it requires so little intervention, and it's more than the appeal is, it helps us with OSA, but it actually helps us with the entire supply chain, and it helps to solve some other really key problems like food traceability, food safety. We have the FDA's FSMA Food Safety Modernization Act, which we have until January the 20th, 2026 to comply with. This is one of the best ways that you can start checking in goods at the case level in an automated fashion and satisfy that. It's not really why our big project started, but now it's there. It's like, man, we've actually got this digital visibility platform that can be used for FSMA. And then lastly, there's a bunch of sustainability things that when you have real-time visibility, you can address. And those are basically opportunities to cut waste, organizing your flow of produce based on freshness and ripeness, seeing things that are being kept at the wrong temperature. So there's so many things you can do, but the subject of your podcast is the catalyst. And grocery is where all of these problems exist, but they actually exist in a whole bunch of other industries as well. And we are doing work in postal and other healthcare, but grocery is really the sweet spot as far as we're concerned.
Okay, perfect. So I do have a question from my friend Ten McCaffrey. He's got a question that basically, I'll summarize it, but there used to be an expectation for electronic article surveillance, basically those little tags that leave the store. Some retailers were using a Sensormatic tag, others were using a checkpoint tag. There were two different competing infrastructures. The one that probably suffered the most was people like Procter & Gamble, because they got some product go into a Sensormatic customer, some of it go into a checkpoint customer, et cetera. When we think about these tags, it sounds like in the food, this probably makes sense for dry grocery, canned vegetables, a lot of stuff that's probably not really RFID friendly anyway. But when we think about things like apparel, a box of blue jeans, we've already got RFID at the item level inside that box. How do we avoid having suppliers have to put a different kind of tag on the outside of the box to track the location of the tag? That is a issue I think we're going to have to continue to think about as industry. Any kind of reaction to that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting subject. And first of all, I'd say this is RFID. It's a radio frequency identifier. And so there's a world where this can be used in apparel. And we've done a bunch of work with amazing apparel companies to do real-time visibility of and tracking the flow of apparel. As I talk to retail customers, their approach to loss prevention seems to have evolved. And I, to be frank, I don't think this can compete. If you want to take that slot and say, I'm going to put a Wiliot IoT Pixel in its place, it's not going to do as well at the use case as was designed for these some of the technologies which are at a different frequency and use different media. So if you do this, you're going to block this tag. So it doesn't do as well at the triggering of the alarm that goes off as you cross the threshold. What we're seeing is fewer and fewer retailers really think that approach is the best. For some, it will be. Many others, what their biggest problem is thinking that they've got the red dress in stock when it actually isn't in stock, because the sale of red dresses has gone down. Maybe people don't like red dresses in Arkansas. Well, actually, they do. It's just you don't have any, and you think you've got them. So that real-time detection of loss is something that this technology can do a good job of. And I think way off in the future, as ambient IoT starts to become pervasive, when people are starting to use this technology in their wardrobe, in their pantry, to have auto replenishment and circular approaches to sharing clothing and giving it back and renting it, then you'll start to see, you'll have the concept of tracking products that are going to a destination where the payment hasn't been made. And you can say, hey, there seem to be like 200 pairs of Levi jeans in this person's home, and they don't appear to have paid for them. Then you can start to track them in the same way as an AirTag from Apple can be used to track things. I think we're, a few years away from that. And so the two technologies will coexist. But if what you're focused on is just understanding the inventory implications of theft, then this is a good solution today.
Yeah. So I think the asset protection play part of that was just an example where I'll just use a couple of examples. I believe Walmart is a Sensormatic and Target is a checkpoint. So you got two different ones. So if I'm Procter & Gamble, do I put on a Sensormatic tag, EAS tag, or do I put on a checkpoint one? And I kind of get stuck in the middle. My question, I guess, is real specifically, let's just take Wrangler jeans. I have RFID item level tags in the clothes already. We think we're going to get to a point where we would ask the supplier, this case Wrangler, to put a Wiliot tag on the outside case to track that case through the supply chain and have all the individual items RFID tagged? Is that because again, what you don't want to do is say, well, put 3 different kinds of tags on this product, because it gets confusing for the supplier, right?
Right. So yeah, maybe
okay.
We'll have to see if it makes sense to double up.
Okay.
The future that I see is, at the moment, Wiliot is one of the first ambient IoT players to scale. And what we do with Bluetooth. But there's a lot happening in the background that is a major force that I think is going to disrupt all of these technologies, which is ambient IoT is being adopted by a couple of other huge standards bodies, 3GPP, they decide what's in 5G and 6G, and also IEEE. And so there will be an 802.11, which is the Wi-Fi standard for ambient IoT, and release 19, which will be coming out a few years to a phone near you, will support ambient IoT. And so I think basically the world will move to another generation of intelligent tags where the tagging will not be just on the hang tag, it'll be integrated into the wash label. And that visibility in the supply chain will help in the manufacturing, the distribution, the sales, but also will help consumers. And it'll open up new business models for manufacturers where they can start to see consumption of the product in the consumer's home and new business models. So maybe I want to, rather than buying herbs and spices, I want to subscribe to that. There's a vendor that I like, a supplier, I like their brand, and they can make sure that I don't have herbs and spices that are out of date. I never run out. I have auto replenishment. These things can be used to trigger auto replenishment. And in the case of clothing, these tags can be washable, like RFID. But unlike RFID, they can talk to the radios that are in the washing machine. So you can detect if you've got reds and the whites in the same wash. You can make sure that that wash cycle is right. You can keep track of how long it's being washed, so that if you change your mind and you don't want that product, maybe there's a secondary market. That seems weird and bizarre to us. But in the same way as people will rent a tux, there's interest in the circular economy as applied to clothing. So that's where I see it going. How we get there, I'm not smart enough to predict the exact sequence of when the tipping point goes from a very successful first generation of RFID to another generation of RFID, which is ambient IoT, being driven by these massive technology companies. You think about the phone companies, they dwarf any of the technology companies that have really been pushing RFID. They have a recurring revenue relationship with each of us. And that's probably a good thing, because we have to deal with privacy implications and all of that sort of thing. So we're getting way off into the future. That's okay. But that's basically where I see things going. And this really will go from an RFID market, which is 30, 40 billion, to literally trillions of things that are online, that are making the world more efficient and opening up some really amazing experiences and helping to make shopping better.
Awesome. So we've talked a lot about retail, an individual retail store. I've got a question here from Steve, and I think it's a really good one because I don't know the answer to the question either. In large footprint distribution centers, how are the tags read? Is it an overhead reader? And what's the typical read range that you would get? Much different than a retail shelf environment in a DC. How does that work?
Well, there's a lot of flexibility in how you do that reading, and there's a lot of different third-party devices. We don't make the readers, so we're working with an ecosystem that's expanding rapidly. And there's a lot of existing movement to Bluetooth readers in distribution centers to track things like forklifts and pallets and more expensive things. And we can tap in and reuse that. We're working very closely with the major makers of Wi-Fi access points. They all have Bluetooth radios. And so that's another direction. But also what we're seeing is mobile readers that become pervasive. So I'm talking about crowdsourcing using readers that are on forklifts. We all wear, well, we don't all. Some of us wear watches that read Bluetooth. And so we see our customers going in both directions. Some of them want very low-cost mobile readers that are pervasive, where it's not literally real time, but because people are moving around, you get this kind of up-to-the-hour view of things. And in some cases, they just want to blanket the environment with readers. And the range of these with our Gen 2 product, which is what we're selling today, is about 10 to 15 meters, but that range will increase. We actually just uploaded the designs for Gen 3 to the fab that makes the Gen 3 chips. And so next year you'll see amazing performance that will give more range and will mean you can cover a warehouse with less things. But the biggest area of movement, I think, beyond the warehouse and the store is actually in the tractor trailer. So this is, I think, relatively new, and to me, it's very exciting. We're used to telematics in the cab, and we're used to, or we're seeing some movement with wanting to track those big shipping containers that some are refrigerated, some are not. But the big thing that we're seeing that's changing, partly because of this technology, is the retailers and others, postal services, wanting to see what's in the container. So IoT started off with tracking the big expensive things, but now we're kind of double clicking. And, as we start to read these sensors that are going on cases of strawberries and tomatoes, we're seeing all sorts of temperature excursions that no one even knew about before. So there was a temperature sensor maybe at one end, or maybe a few test probes that were put in that were used for sampling. But when you can see every single case and carton, you can see a bunch of quality issues that may impact safety, but certainly impact shelf life and the look of the produce. So we want the produce looking good when it arrives on the shelf, so people buy it. We want to extend the shelf life so that we don't have to waste. And so there's a really big RFI that's going out to a very, very large fleet of the tractor trailers to make them basically ambient IoT aware, so that they can tell the state of what's in them throughout all of the zones in these shipping containers.
And so, just so I understand, so a big tractor trailer backs up to the back of a distribution center. Let's just say it's Procter & Gamble and it's all laundry detergent. We've got Gain in there and Sheer in there and Tide in there, et cetera. When they open that door and start unloading that product, what you're saying is those readers could be on the fork truck, or they could actually be in the tractor trailer, sharing the fact that these items are in the trailer now moving into the distribution centers. That's the kind of logic that we're walking through here?
Yeah.
Okay. And then once those cases go up into the steel, where there is a place that they're stocked and stored until a store would order them, what reads them up in that steel? Is it people walking by who have got Bluetooth enabled phones and devices and watches? Is that what gives you that signal?
It will vary, because these are like Lego bricks. You can put them together in all the way. But I think what you described will actually be the exception. If you have a lot of these readers around, you can start, rather than it's the difference between a black and white snapshot and relying on the fact that everyone's got a phone that can record streaming video. So you have enough readers around, you can start to see the movement. So the inventory goes from being a snapshot to a vector, where you're actually starting to track the movement of things, and you can see where they were last seen, and you can actually start tracking the movement of where it went. And maybe it disappears at some point, but you've got a pretty good, it's a bit like the security cameras in the major cities. You don't have 100% coverage, but you have a pretty good idea where things have gone, even if you don't have 100% coverage. I think eventually we will get 100% coverage, but that's not the reality of 2023. But we do get that vector view rather than the snapshot view.
Gotcha. So another text that I just got from somebody: food safety is one of the big issues surrounding, has been for a long time. Not only food safety, but waste. How much food that we throw away all the time. And I know if you've been part of this, I believe Wiliot has a tremendous opportunity to potentially save millions in terms of the waste and make sure fresh product is ending up with the customer. Is that some of your primary use examples that you're using?
Absolutely.
And if so, how does that work? How does that work practically?
Yeah, I think, again, the driver for a lot of our customers has been the OSA, but then they suddenly realize they have a way of measuring temperature over time, and even humidity. So every single one of these things is a temperature sensor, and it's pushing out that temperature visibility. And so what we have seen when you put these on cases and crates and pallets and totes, individual totes, sometimes we see fruit that is being frozen and defrosted and frozen and defrosted half a dozen times between the DC and the store. So imagine what that does to the look and the life of that product. I'm excited because I think some of the value players that are out there in retail, actually, because they're so big and so sophisticated, they can deploy this infrastructure. I think they have an opportunity to be a quality freshness player as well, because they've put this digital infrastructure in place, they've put the readers in place, and suddenly they can start using it for other things. And I think the Food Safety Modernization Act compliance, it's coming. It's really very difficult I was speaking to one of our customers and I'm like, so do you think the industry will push back and the FSMA deadline for being able to give a inventory within 24 hours of a food incident of every leaf of lettuce that might be impacted? Do you think that is going to get pushed out? And he said, we can't take that risk, because if we decide we're going to assume it's not going to happen and our nearest competitor does it, then it's going to make us A, look really bad, and B, they are going to design the standard operating procedure that we'll have to adopt. So I think that the big grocery chains are taking this very, very seriously. And they have a challenge, which is scanning in every case at the back of the store has not been something that generally is done. You generally assume what has been sent is what's being received. And so the idea of hiring 3 shifts of workers to start doing case level scanning with handheld optical scanners or even RFID scanners, that's hugely expensive. So if you can just use this digital ambient IoT, digital real-time visibility platform that you put in for OSA, but to start to do the case level tracking that allows you to then produce that spreadsheet that the FDA could ask you for with 24 hours notice, then I think that's a win. And it's probably a compelling event that will start to accelerate the deployment of the infrastructure, which will help the OSA problem, but it's also going to help with regulatory compliance, which is kind of a non-optional thing that has to be responded to. And it's not just grocers, it's quick service restaurants, it's a lot of very large companies that are having to re-engineer. And on one level, it's kind of simple. I need to have these lock codes, these traceability lock codes that come from the producer that identify a batch and ultimately identify the field where the spinach or the lettuce came from. But then I need to keep a handle on where it is, and just saying that it was scanned on the shelf isn't good enough. You need to know where it is in the back room, and you need to not guess that it got off the truck, but you need to have scanned it and seen it. And so I think, in the same way as, because what we're talking about with ambient IoT in a way is infrastructure, and infrastructure is notoriously hard to justify and pay for. And the reason why we've got a highway system, arguably one of the best highway systems in the world in this country, is not because they wanted you and me to have a better journey to our business or on holiday. It was because they had to move the missiles from Eisenhower had to move the missiles. That was the compelling event that drove the infrastructure that then helped fuel our economy. It allowed these trucks to get to faraway places. And so I think food safety is going to be that compelling event that will drive the infrastructure that will actually help the omni-channel OSA problem get solved in a solid way.
Well, I love that analogy. And I just think back just a few years ago, you used to order something from a retailer and you'd log into UPS or FedEx or whoever else was, and they go, it should arrive next Tuesday. Well, now it got shipped from this location to this fulfillment center to this consolidation center. It's coming out of that consolidation center. It's on the road. You'll see it by 2:00 on Thursday. That kind of incredible value that from a customer perspective, I know where my stuff is in the route is real helpful. But today, Steve, I think that requires a lot of people taking extremely expensive labor and scanning stuff, or running it through a tunnel, or doing this, or we're spending a lot of money from a labor perspective, having people in a store and a retail supply chain collect data for our systems. And no offense is, number one, they don't do it very well. They don't do it very thoroughly all the time. Number two, it's not something we should be having them do. We should figure out how to collect that data. As they're unloading a truck, that information should just be collected. I shouldn't have to stop and do a step like scan this or wand this or turn this on, et cetera, to actually get that data collected. I think that's a real important fact. And I think that's the enabling technology that either your technology can do or kind of fixed infrastructure with RFID can do. I think that's the future. Yeah. Getting companies to pay for that is exactly right, which is, oh, but that's so expensive. Yeah, but when you add up all those business cases, it becomes a much better selling proposition. Maybe we just need to move military equipment across the country. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. So a couple other things there. The other thing is, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but there's a lot of technology out there for the retail supply chain to wrestle with. I've got current 2D barcodes. I'm moving with Sunset 2026 to more QR codes, or to, more advanced barcoding. I have UHF RFID or RAIN or whatever you want to call that. I've got vision technology. Now I've got Bluetooth technology, which is on the umbrella. If I'm a retailer, I'm getting really confused about how all this stuff fits together. How would you summarize the specific fit that Wiliot has today for a retail supply chain? And what do you think the future, some of the future stuff like we've already talked about, but what's the practical application today for the retail supply chain of your technology?
I think the way one of our customers sees what we do for them, and I love it when smart people express something in a very simple way. It's to me, it's the sign of intelligence when someone can take a really complex thing and boil it down to a simple phrase. And it seems like customers are very often the best ones to do that. And they basically described us as their visibility platform. So they have automation platforms and they have a visibility platform. And so having visibility is that infrastructure that then allows you to solve the nil pick problem, the omnichannel paradigm that has been driven into our lives by COVID and is not going away. My mom is, she's not getting any younger. She's going to continue ordering online.
Yep.
So, in my mind, that visibility platform for a retailer, it's a great solution for omnichannel. It's a great solution for food safety and regulatory compliance with FSMA. And it's also a great solution for sustainability and freshness. And I put those two together. One of the things that you can do with this that some people may not care about, but the SEC cares about, is being able to measure carbon footprint accurately. And it's really difficult. And at the moment, there's a huge amount of turmoil in companies, particular with the CFO, that they have to respond to the new SEC requirements on climate and sustainability, and they have to have plans to get a handle on what the carbon footprint is. And so there's a bunch of theoretical work that goes on that may or may not be right, but it's sort of the current benchmark is, give me a theoretical view of what the carbon footprint is across my 3,000 stores. What we're able to do once you accept, okay, I need a visibility platform, is we can actually start to give you real-time visibility of the carbon footprint of a given product, a given distribution route, a given store. And don't forget, carbon is essentially cost. It's a measure of the raw materials, and The worst thing for your carbon footprint is when produce rots, because it gives off methane. And so your carbon footprint numbers go off, but also you're writing this stuff off the balance sheet as well.
Yeah.
So, my personal view is that counting carbon will be the next Six Sigma for good enterprises. You'll know that it's a quality company if they can give you a really good carbon report. And the paradigm shift for carbon reporting will be from theoretical to real-time product level carbon footprinting. And then you can start making the whole organization accountable for moving forward and getting the efficiency that we either want because we like hugging trees, that's what I like to do, or we like to reduce the carbon footprint because it just means we're going to be more profitable and more efficient and have be more competitive. So if you are tasking a store manager with, you need to reduce your carbon footprint, and having those fruit and vegetables overnight in that reefer container that's in the car park not only is a problem because people can't buy the stuff, but it's also just a terribly wasteful way of keeping produce chilled.
Yep.
That kind of real-time carbon accounting, I think, is actually going to be the thing that excellent companies use. So if the business problem is omnichannel, the compliance problem is food safety, I think that carbon accounting and real-time visibility of carbon and cost will be kind of the new quality metric, which will be an operational driver. And the person that's accountable for that is actually the CFO, and they're the ones that, no one argues, do we need a system to run SAP on? When did you hear about a debate about spending money on the EY PwC bill for the ERP system?
Right.
Funnily enough, that stuff just gets taken care of.
Sure.
Because the person that really understands the need is the guy that, or the girl, or the lady, or the woman that holds the purse strings. And so I think ESG may be the environment, social governance, and particularly the SEC mandate on carbon accounting will be another driver for bringing us into the new age where the digital and physical come together and we get visibility on everything around us.
I just got a question from Robert Taylor, and I think it's a very good one. I assume this is very applicable to what we're talking about food, which is quick service restaurants. I'm assuming this is a copy and paste of what we're seeing in a retail supply chain is certainly applicable for the QSR business, right?
There's some twists that are different, but they have to comply to FSMA. They have, my kids are in their 20s, and so I'm learning a lot about QSR from the side of the people that are working with. And having brought my kids up, I'd like to think they're model citizens, but they are challenging employees. And so running a quick service restaurant, whether it's the high-end sort of the Panera Starbucks or McDonald's, which is where I worked when I was a kid.
There you go.
It is amazing that they're able to do what they do with unseasoned workforce. So automation, relying on people scanning and checking things in, and the labor shortages that they have, you need to be checking in and certainly complying to FSMA, but just tracking where things are. I couldn't believe it. One of my shortly before I joined Wiliot 6 years ago, I was on a plane with a guy that sold furniture to Starbucks, and I'd just written this book called Beacon Technologies. I thought it was pretty obscure, and I'd recognized the fact that 90% of the people I'm going to sit next to on an airplane are not going to understand what a Bluetooth tag is. And I just sort of tell him, expecting that this is the way that I'm going to get a peaceful night's sleep on the way to London, where I was flying back to see my family. But actually, we ended up speaking for 3 hours because he was putting Bluetooth into Starbucks furniture because they actually have merchandising compliance challenges of knowing, is the furniture where it's supposed to be? Is the display out there? And the way that he felt this needed to be solved was embedding visibility into the furniture that he was making, selling to one of the world's biggest QSRs. So visibility is super relevant to QSRs.
Awesome.
Food freshness, food safety is, inventory is, and they have a lot of the same labor problems that you very eloquently described earlier.
Yep. Awesome. Steve, I've got one last question and then we'll kind of wrap it up here. We're kind of heading to the end of the hour. The first is, I usually say, do you have any closing comments? But the other question I would ask you is, what question did I not ask that I should have? So anything on your mind that we didn't cover, you think it's important for our audience to hear, or any closing comments that you have?
I think you asked amazing questions, and I think what you're doing here is important, good work. So I don't have any constructive criticism at all. To wrap things up, I would say it's worth people checking out this new phenomenon of ambient IoT. I'm the marketing guy, so I've been selling our pixels. We call them pixels because they're small, they bring light to things. You have a lot of them, and you suddenly get this high definition picture that shows you things that you couldn't see before. So as you can see, I'm a big Wiliot fan, but I would say the category is actually more important than the company. And this ambient IoT category is growing. I think it's the way we get RFID from billions to trillions. And I think it's the way we solve some of the big problems that you and I have been talking about. Yeah. And I would say there are huge opportunities for everybody in ambient IoT, whether you're making tags, whether you're making edge devices, whether you're a software developer. There's a lot of education that's required. So people like you and the press and the industry analysts and the management consultants are very important in this transition to getting visibility that will help us solve some really important problems. So, and of course, then the practitioners, the retailers and the people that actually need to use the technology. There's a lot of opportunity, and I think the more we can learn together, and this is not about fighting for market share. This is about building this new future together as quickly as we can.
That's awesome. Well, Steve, I want to thank you very much for your time. I know it's your birthday weekend, so you've got plans right after this to head out and do some celebration in your birthday. Don't go into stores and look for COVID tests. That's not part of your birthday celebration. So enjoy that. I do know that you're also going to be joining myself and a lot of other people next week in Orlando at RFID Journal. I believe you'll have a booth there. So if anybody has any specific questions, they can certainly look you up. I'll be there Tuesday through Thursday as well. I'm actually leading a session about the future use cases in retail of RFID. So I'd love to have you guys, the audience, join us for that. But Steve, thank you very much for your time. Incredibly helpful. That's why we like this platform. It's conversations on retail, and that's what we've been doing for the last hour. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Have a great birthday celebration, and we'll see you next week in Orlando.
Thank you, Mike. See you there.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.